My name is Eric Lamb, and I used to think I was pretty good at reading people. 10 years in the Army as a reconnaissance specialist will teach you to notice things. The way someone holds their shoulders when they're lying, how their voice changes when they're hiding something, the little tells that separate truth from fiction. I made a living out of being observant, careful, methodical. Turns out I wasn't paying nearly enough attention at home. "Victor's being weird again," Julia said, stirring her coffee with more force than necessary. My wife had this habit of complaining about her boss every morning, like it was part of her daily routine. "He keeps scheduling these late meetings, and yesterday he asked if I wanted to grab dinner to discuss the Henderson account." I looked up from my laptop where I was reviewing blueprints for a new manufacturing facility. As an industrial designer for Meridian Engineering, I spent most of my time making sure buildings didn't fall down and machines didn't explode. It was honest work, and it paid well enough to keep Julia happy in her HR director position at Garrison Industries. "Did you tell him to shove it?" I asked, taking a sip of my coffee. Julia laughed, but something about it felt off. Too bright, too quick. "Eric, he's like 60 years old and married. Trust me, Victor Garrison is not exactly a threat. The man wears suspenders and talks about his golf handicap." She was right, of course. I'd met Victor at a few company events over the years. He was one of those corporate types who wore expensive suits and drove a BMW, but he had the personality of wet cardboard. Not exactly the kind of guy who'd sweep anyone off their feet. "Besides," Julia continued, "you know I can handle myself. If some old creep tried anything, he'd be filing a harassment complaint against himself." I grinned at that. Julia was tough, had to be, working in HR for a company full of engineers and contractors. She could shut down inappropriate behavior with a look that could freeze water. "Just be careful," I said, closing my laptop. "Guys like that sometimes think their money makes them irresistible." "Please. The only thing irresistible about Victor Garrison is his ability to make everyone in the room want to leave." Julia grabbed her purse and keys. "I'll see you tonight. Don't wait up if I'm late. We're doing performance reviews this week." She kissed my cheek and headed out, leaving me with the lingering scent of her perfume and a nagging feeling I couldn't quite shake. That evening, Julia came home after 10, claiming the reviews had run long. She seemed distracted, checking her phone more than usual and giving short answers to my questions about her day. When I suggested we watch a movie, she said she was too tired and went straight to bed. I stayed up telling myself I was being paranoid. Julia had always been dedicated to her job, sometimes to a fault. Late nights weren't unusual, especially during review season. But something had changed in the past few weeks. She was distant, preoccupied, and increasingly critical of everything I did. When I left dishes in the sink, she'd make passive-aggressive comments about responsibility. When I forgot to pick up her dry cleaning, she acted like I'd committed a federal crime. "You're being ridiculous, Eric," became her favorite phrase whenever I tried to talk about it. The next morning, I was grabbing coffee at the break room in my office when I overheard two women from the accounting department talking. "Did you see Julia Lamb at the Riverside Grill last week?" one of them said. "She was with some older guy in a suit. Looked pretty cozy for a business meeting." "Wasn't that her boss? What's his name? Victor something?" "Garrison. Yeah, that's him. They were holding hands across the table. I mean, maybe it was nothing, but..." They noticed me standing there and quickly changed the subject, but the damage was done. My hands were shaking as I walked back to my desk. Holding hands. At a restaurant, my wife and her boss. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I spent the rest of the day trying to focus on work, but my mind kept circling back to that conversation. Julia had mentioned going out with clients last week, said it was a boring dinner with some potential vendors. She hadn't mentioned Victor being there, and she certainly hadn't mentioned any hand-holding. That night, I decided to test the waters. "How was your day?" I asked when Julia came home. "Fine, busy, the usual." She was already heading toward the stairs. "Hey, remember that client dinner you had last week? How did that go?" She paused, her hand on the banister. "What client dinner? You said you were meeting with some vendors at the Riverside Grill." "Oh, that. It was fine. Nothing interesting." She started up the stairs again. "Was Victor there?" Another pause, longer this time. "Why would you ask that?" "Just curious. You mentioned he's been scheduling a lot of meetings lately." "Eric, you're being weird. It was just a boring work dinner. Can we please not turn it into an interrogation?" She disappeared upstairs, leaving me standing in the living room with more questions than answers. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I'd reached the point where I needed to know the truth. That weekend, while Julia was in the shower, I picked up her phone from the nightstand. She'd always been casual about her phone around me, never bothering to hide her screen or change her passcode. It was still my birthday, 0924, which should have made me feel better, but somehow made everything worse. I opened her text messages and scrolled down to Victor's name. What I found there made my stomach drop. "Can't stop thinking about yesterday. You looked incredible in that blue dress. When can I see you again? This waiting is torture. Meet me at the Westin tomorrow at 6. I've already booked the room. Last night was amazing. I never knew it could feel like this." There were dozens of messages, going back weeks, flirty, romantic, explicit. My wife, the woman who complained about Victor being a creep, was having an affair with him. I scrolled through more messages, each one feeling like a punch to the chest. They had pet names for each other. They talked about future plans, about how they were meant to be together, about how much they hated sneaking around. "Eric's so clueless," one of Julia's messages read. "Sometimes I think he wouldn't notice if I moved out completely." The shower was still running. I quickly scrolled to the most recent messages. "Can't wait for tonight. Wear the red lingerie. Already packed it. This is getting easier." "Good. We're getting better at this." I heard the shower turn off and quickly put the phone back where I'd found it, my hands trembling with rage and disbelief. Julia came out of the bathroom in her robe, humming softly. She looked at me and frowned. "Are you okay? You look pale." I stared at her, this woman I'd been married to for 8 years, wondering how long she'd been lying to my face. "I'm fine," I managed to say. She kissed my forehead. "I have to run some errands this afternoon. I'll probably be gone for a few hours." Errands. Right. More like a romantic afternoon at the Westin with her boss. "Sure," I said. "Take your time." After she left, I sat in our living room, surrounded by the life we'd built together, and tried to figure out what the hell I was going to do next. I could confront her directly, but I already knew how that would go. She'd deny everything, turn it around on me, make me feel crazy for even suspecting her. She was good at that, making me doubt my own perceptions. I could hire a private investigator, gather more evidence, go the traditional divorce route. But that felt too passive, too clean. Julia wasn't just cheating on me, she was laughing about it, mocking me in her text messages, treating our marriage like a joke. No, I wanted something more. I wanted her to feel the humiliation, the betrayal, the complete destruction of everything she thought she could control. I'd spent years learning how to be patient, how to plan, how to wait for the perfect moment to strike. Those skills hadn't disappeared just because I'd traded my uniform for a suit. Julia thought I was clueless. Victor thought I was just another naive husband who'd never figure it out. They were both about to learn how wrong they were. The Garrison Industries Christmas party was held at the Grandview Hotel downtown, a fancy place with crystal chandeliers and waiters in bow ties. Julia had been looking forward to it for weeks, spending hours picking out the perfect dress and getting her hair done at an expensive salon. "You clean up nice," I told her as we walked into the ballroom. She was wearing a black cocktail dress that hugged her curves, the same one Victor had complimented in his text messages. "Thanks," she said, but she was already scanning the room, looking for someone. When her eyes found Victor near the bar, her whole demeanor changed. She stood straighter, smiled brighter, touched her hair. "I should go say hello to some people," she said. "Sure, I'll grab us some drinks." I watched her make her way across the room, stopping to chat with colleagues, but always moving in Victor's direction. When she reached him, he leaned in close to whisper something in her ear, his hand briefly touching her lower back. From across the room, they looked like any boss and employee having a casual conversation. But I knew better. I could see the way she tilted her head when she laughed, the way he looked at her when he thought no one was watching. "Eric!" "Good to see you, man." I turned to find Tom Miles, my old army buddy who now worked private security. We'd stayed in touch over the years, grabbing beers occasionally to complain about civilian life. "Hey, Tommy, what are you doing here?" "Working. Garrison hired my company to provide security for the party. Apparently, they've had some issues with corporate espionage lately." He gestured toward the small army of security personnel positioned around the room. "Paranoid bunch, these corporate types." "Yeah, well, they've got reason to be careful." Tom studied my face. "You okay? You look like someone stole your lunch money." I glanced back at Julia and Victor, who were now standing closer together, their conversation looking increasingly intimate. "Just tired. Work's been crazy." "Uh-huh." Tom followed my gaze. "That your wife over there with the suit?" "Yeah. And the suit is her boss." Tom was quiet for a moment, watching them interact. "How long has that been going on?" "What do you mean?" "Eric, I've been doing security for 15 years. I know what workplace flirting looks like, and that ain't it. That's something else entirely." I felt a bitter laugh escape. "A few weeks, as far as I know. Maybe longer." "Damn, I'm sorry, man." "Don't be sorry yet. Be sorry for them." Tom raised an eyebrow. "What's that supposed to mean?" Before I could answer, Victor stepped up to the microphone at the front of the room. The crowd gradually quieted as he began his annual year-end speech, talking about company achievements and future goals. I pulled out my phone and opened the photos I'd taken of Julia's text messages over the past few days. I'd been documenting everything, building a case, waiting for the right moment. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victor was saying, "I want to thank you all for your hard work and dedication this year. Garrison Industries has achieved record profits, and it's all thanks to employees like you." I looked at Tom. "You said they're worried about corporate espionage?" "Yeah, why?" "How's their network security?" "Pretty standard." "Why are you asking?" "Just curious." I was already moving toward the AV booth at the back of the room, where a young tech was monitoring the presentation slides. "Excuse me," I said to the technician. "I'm Eric Lamb, Julia's husband from HR. She asked me to help with something." The kid nodded, recognizing Julia's name. "Sure, what do you need?" She wanted to add a few slides to the presentation, something about employee appreciation. I held up my phone. "Can you connect this to the system?" "Yeah, no problem." He handed me a cable. "Just plug it in and I'll switch the input." My heart was pounding as I connected my phone to the presentation system. Victor was still talking, completely unaware of what was about to happen. "Now," I said quietly. The tech switched the input, and suddenly the large screen behind Victor was displaying Julia's text messages in high definition for everyone to see. "Can't wait to feel your hands on me again. The way you kissed me in your office yesterday made me so wet. I love you, Victor. I can't wait to leave Eric and be with you properly." The room went completely silent. Victor turned around to see what everyone was staring at, and his face went white when he saw the messages on the screen. "What the hell?" he started to say, but more messages kept appearing. "Eric's working late again tonight. Come over and we can use our bed this time. I faked being sick yesterday so we could spend the afternoon together. Worth it. He has no idea. Sometimes I think about telling him just to see the look on his face." Julia was pushing through the crowd, trying to get to the AV booth, her face a mask of panic and rage. But the damage was already done. Everyone in the room, her colleagues, her subordinates, Victor's wife, had seen the messages. "Turn it off!" Victor shouted into the microphone, but his voice was shaking. I disconnected my phone and handed the cable back to the stunned technician. "Thanks for your help." Julia reached me just as I was walking away from the booth. "You bastard!" she hissed, grabbing my arm. "How could you do this?" I looked at her calmly. "Do what? Tell the truth? You've ruined everything, my career, my reputation." "Your reputation?" I laughed. "Julia, you ruined that yourself the moment you decided to screw your boss and laugh about it behind my back." People were staring at us now, some trying to pretend they weren't listening while others made no effort to hide their interest in the drama unfolding. "We need to talk about this at home," Julia said through gritted teeth. "No, we don't. We're done talking. In fact, we're just done." I started walking toward the exit, but Julia followed me. "Eric, wait. Please. I can explain." I stopped and turned around. The entire ballroom was watching us now, the Christmas party forgotten in favor of the real-time soap opera playing out in front of them. "Explain what? How you've been lying to me for months? How you used our bed to screw another man? How you laughed about how clueless I was?" My voice was getting louder, but I didn't care. "Or maybe you want to explain how you were planning to leave me but were too much of a coward to say it to my face." Julia's eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't buying the performance anymore. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," she said. "No, it was supposed to happen with you taking half my assets and me never finding out why my marriage fell apart." I looked around the room at all the faces staring at us. "Well, now everyone knows. Merry Christmas, everyone. Thanks for coming to the Julia and Victor show." I walked out of the ballroom, leaving my wife standing there in her expensive dress, surrounded by her colleagues and the wreckage of her carefully constructed lies. Tom caught up with me in the parking lot. "That was either the stupidest thing I've ever seen or the most brilliant," he said. "Probably both." I was shaking with adrenaline and rage, but I'm not done yet. "What do you mean?" "Julia thinks she can destroy my life and walk away clean. She's about to learn how wrong she is." Tom studied my face in the parking lot lights. "Eric, I know you're angry, but you need to be careful. Don't do anything that's going to land you in jail." "Don't worry. I'm not going to hurt anyone, but I'm also not going to roll over and let them walk all over me." "What are you planning?" I looked back at the hotel, where the party was probably still in chaos, where Julia was probably trying to do damage control, where Victor was probably wondering how his perfect little affair had just exploded in front of his wife and his entire company. I'm going to teach them both a lesson about consequences. I spent that night in a hotel room, staring at the ceiling and planning my next move. Julia had called 17 times and sent dozens of text messages, alternating between apologies and threats. I didn't respond to any of them. The next morning, I drove to my office to find the entire building buzzing with gossip. Word about the Christmas party had spread quickly, and everyone wanted to know the details. Eric, my supervisor Janet, called me into her office as soon as I arrived. "We need to talk." I sat down across from her desk, already knowing what was coming. "I heard about what happened last night," she said. "I'm sorry about your situation, but we have a problem." "What kind of problem?" "Garrison Industries is one of our biggest clients. Victor Garrison called this morning, and he's threatening to pull their contract unless we take action." "What kind of action?" Janet looked uncomfortable. "He's claiming you hacked into their computer system to steal private communications. He wants us to fire you and cooperate with a criminal investigation." I laughed, but there wasn't any humor in it. "I didn't hack anything. Those were text messages from my wife's phone." "Can you prove that?" "The phone records will show where the messages came from. But Victor knows that, which is why he's trying to get ahead of the story." "Eric, I want to help you, but my hands are tied. If Garrison pulls their contract, we'll have to lay off half the department." So you're firing me to protect a cheating corporate executive? I'm putting you on administrative leave pending an investigation. It's the best I can do. I nodded, having expected this. Victor was playing the game exactly the way I thought he would, using his money and influence to try to destroy me professionally. Fine. But when this blows up in his face, remember that I tried to handle this quietly. I cleaned out my desk while my colleagues watched nervously, probably wondering if they'd be next if they said the wrong thing to the wrong client. Tom was waiting for me in the parking lot when I came out with my box of personal items. Rough morning? He asked, about what I expected. Victor's trying to destroy my career to cover his own tracks. What's your next move? I need to find out exactly how deep this goes. Julia didn't just wake up one morning and decide to have an affair. This has been planned, coordinated. I want to know what else they're hiding. Tom was quiet for a moment. I might be able to help with that. How? Remember I mentioned Garrison's worried about corporate espionage? Well, they hired us to investigate some financial irregularities. Seems like someone's been moving money around, covering their tracks pretty well. You think Victor's embezzling? I think Victor's got his hands in a lot of pies, and not all of them are legitimate, but proving it is another matter. What would you need? Access to his office, his computer, his files, the kind of access that would be completely illegal if we got caught. I looked at Tom, my oldest friend, the guy who'd saved my life more than once in Afghanistan. I can't ask you to risk your career for this. You're not asking. I'm offering. Besides, I never liked that arrogant piece of garbage anyway. That afternoon, we met at a coffee shop downtown to plan our approach. Tom had been studying Garrison Industries security protocols for weeks, looking for vulnerabilities. The building has cameras everywhere, but there's a blind spot near the loading dock, he said, spreading blueprints across the table. We can get in through the service elevator, but we'll only have about 20 minutes before the security rotation brings someone back to that area. What about Victor's office? Top floor, corner suite, electronic lock, but I have the override codes from the security company. And if we get caught? We don't get caught. That night, we drove to the Garrison Industries building in Tom's unmarked van. The parking lot was mostly empty, just a few cars belonging to the cleaning crew and late-working employees. You sure about this? Tom asked as we sat in the van, watching the building. Victor destroyed my marriage and is trying to destroy my career. Yeah, I'm sure. We made our way to the loading dock, where Tom used his security credentials to disable the cameras in our path. The service elevator took us directly to the executive floor, where the hallways were dark and quiet. Victor's office was exactly what I'd expected. Expensive furniture, awards on the walls, a view of the city skyline. His computer was password protected, but Tom had brought equipment to bypass that. What are we looking for? He asked as the computer booted up. Anything that proves he's been planning this. Financial records, personal communications, travel receipts. Julia didn't just fall into bed with this guy, she's too calculating for that. We spent the next 15 minutes going through Victor's files, downloading everything to an encrypted drive. What we found was worse than I'd expected. Victor had been embezzling from the company for years, using a complex network of shell companies and fake vendors to hide the theft. But more importantly, he had a pattern of targeting married female employees, using his position to manipulate them into affairs, then using those relationships to cover his financial crimes. Julia wasn't his first victim. She wasn't even his second. Look at this, Tom said, pointing to a series of emails. He's been planning to pin the embezzlement on Julia if anyone gets too close to the truth. I read over his shoulder, feeling my anger turn into something colder and more focused. Victor hadn't just seduced my wife. He'd set her up to take the fall for his crimes. We need to get out of here, Tom said, checking his watch. We copied everything to the encrypted drive and made our way back to the service elevator. But as we reached the loading dock, we heard voices approaching. Security patrol, Tom whispered. They're early. We pressed ourselves against the wall as two guards walked past, their flashlights sweeping the area. After they passed, we slipped out through the loading dock and made it back to the van without being detected. "So what now?" Tom asked as we drove away. "Now I have a conversation with my wife." I found Julia at her sister Monica's house, where she'd apparently been staying since the Christmas party. Monica answered the door with a hostile expression. "She doesn't want to see you," she said. "That's too bad, because I want to see her." Julia appeared behind her sister, looking tired and defeated. "It's okay, Monica. Let him in." We sat in Monica's living room while she hovered protectively nearby, clearly ready to call the police if I made any threatening moves. "I know about Victor's embezzlement," I said without preamble. Julia's face went pale. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the shell companies, the fake vendors, the money he's been stealing from his own company for years. I'm also talking about how he's planning to frame you for it." "That's impossible. Victor wouldn't—" "Victor has done this before, Julia. You're not his first affair, and you're not his first patsy. He targets married women, seduces them, uses them to help cover his crimes, then throws them under the bus when things get complicated." I pulled out printouts of the documents we'd found and spread them across Monica's coffee table. Julia's hands shook as she read through them. "He told me he loved me," she whispered. "He told you what you needed to hear to make you complicit in his schemes. Look at the dates, Julia. He started targeting you right after the Henderson account audit, when the company started looking more closely at their finances." Monica was reading over Julia's shoulder, her expression growing more alarmed by the minute. "Julia, this is serious. If they can prove you helped him move this money—" "I didn't know," Julia said, but her voice lacked conviction. "He said the transfers were legitimate business expenses." "Did you authorize them?" She nodded miserably. "Then you're on the hook for conspiracy, embezzlement, and fraud. Victor gets to play the victim, the trusting boss who was manipulated by his scheming HR director." Julia looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to understand what you've done. To our marriage, to your career, to your entire future. You threw away everything we built together for a man who was using you from day one. I made a mistake. You made a choice. Every day for months, you chose to lie to me, to cheat on me, to mock me behind my back. Those weren't mistakes. They were decisions." Julia was crying now, but I felt no sympathy for her. The woman I'd married would never have done what she'd done. This person sitting in front of me was a stranger. "So what happens now?" Monica asked. "Now Julia has a choice. She can come clean about Victor's embezzlement and maybe avoid prison, or she can keep protecting him and go down with his ship." "And what about us?" Julia asked. "What about our marriage?" I stood up and looked down at her, this woman who'd shared my bed while planning to destroy my life. "There is no us anymore, Julia. You made sure of that." I walked out of Monica's house and didn't look back. Phase 1 of my plan was complete. Julia now knew exactly how much trouble she was in. Phase 2 was going to be much more interesting. 2 days later, Julia called me for the first time since our confrontation at Monica's house. "Eric, we need to talk," she said, her voice strained. "Victor's been fired. The FBI raided his office this morning. I was sitting in my temporary apartment, a furnished studio that smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and disappointment. That's terrible news. I'm sure you're very upset about your boyfriend's legal troubles. Don't be cruel. I'm in serious trouble here." "Yes, you are. The FBI wants to interview me tomorrow. They think I was involved in the embezzlement." "Were you?" There was a long pause. "I signed some documents. Victor said they were routine financial transfers, but now they're saying the money went to fake companies." "How much money are we talking about?" $2.3 million. I whistled softly. "That's a lot of routine financial transfers. Eric, please. I know you hate me right now, but I need help. If I go to prison, I'll lose everything." "You already lost everything. You just didn't realize it yet." "What's that supposed to mean?" It means you should probably get a lawyer, Julia. A good one. I hung up and immediately called my sister Lisa, who worked as a prosecutor in the district attorney's office. I heard about your situation, she said without preamble. I'm sorry, Eric. Thanks. But I'm not calling for sympathy. I need legal advice. What kind of advice? The kind that keeps me from going to prison for what I'm about to do. Lisa was quiet for a moment. Eric, whatever you're planning, you need to be very careful. Revenge fantasies feel good until you're sitting in a jail cell. I'm not planning to hurt anyone, but I'm also not planning to let Julia and Victor walk away from this without consequences. What do you need to know? If someone were to hypothetically provide evidence of financial crimes to federal investigators, what kind of legal protection would they have? Are we talking about whistleblower protection? We're talking about a concerned citizen who discovered evidence of embezzlement and wanted to make sure justice was served. As long as the evidence was obtained legally and the person cooperating with the investigation wasn't involved in the crimes, they'd be protected. And if the evidence led to the recovery of stolen money, there might even be a reward involved depending on the amount. I smiled for the first time in days. Thanks, Lisa. You've been very helpful. Eric, be careful. And if you need a good divorce lawyer, I know several. Already working on it. That afternoon, I called the FBI field office and asked to speak to the agent handling the Garrison Industries case. Agent Sarah Chen agreed to meet with me at a coffee shop downtown. Mr. Lamb, I understand you have information about Victor Garrison's financial activities? I have evidence that he's been embezzling from his company for years, using a network of shell companies and fake vendors to hide the theft. I handed her the encrypted drive Tom and I had prepared, containing all the financial records we'd found in Victor's office. How did you obtain this information? I discovered it during my own investigation into my wife's affair with Mr. Garrison. She had access to some of his files through her position in HR. It wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't entirely false either. Julia had mentioned seeing financial documents in Victor's office, and she definitely had access to the company's financial systems. Agent Chen reviewed the files on her laptop, her expression growing more interested by the minute. This is very comprehensive. Your wife provided all of this? My wife was manipulated into helping Mr. Garrison move money through the company's accounts. She thought she was processing legitimate business expenses, but as you can see from the documentation, the vendor companies don't actually exist. Is your wife willing to cooperate with our investigation? I believe she's beginning to understand that cooperation is in her best interest. Agent Chen closed her laptop and looked at me carefully. Mr. Lamb, I want to be clear about something. If your wife was knowingly involved in this embezzlement scheme, providing evidence against Mr. Garrison won't necessarily protect her from prosecution. I understand, but she's more valuable to you as a witness than as a defendant, especially if she can provide testimony about how Mr. Garrison manipulated her and other employees. Other employees? I smiled. Agent Chen, I think you're going to find that Julia wasn't Mr. Garrison's first victim, or his last. 2 days later, the story broke in the local newspaper. Corporate executive arrested in multi-million-dollar embezzlement scheme. The article detailed Victor's arrest and the ongoing investigation into his financial crimes, but it also mentioned that several female employees had come forward with allegations of workplace harassment and manipulation. Julia called me that evening, her voice barely above a whisper. Did you see the news? Hard to miss it. Victor's quite the celebrity now. Eric, I need you to know something. The FBI offered me a deal. If I testify against Victor and provide evidence about his other relationships, they'll recommend probation instead of prison time. That sounds like a good deal. Are you going to take it? I don't have much choice, but there's something else. What? I'm pregnant. The words hit me like a physical blow. I sat down heavily on my couch, trying to process what she'd just said. How long have you known? A few weeks. I was going to tell you, but then everything fell apart. Is it mine? There was a long pause. I don't know. You don't know? Eric, I've been sleeping with Victor for months. The timing, it could be either of you. I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. So let me get this straight. You're pregnant, you don't know who the father is, and you're about to testify against one of the potential fathers in a federal criminal case. When you put it like that, it sounds like a complete disaster, which is exactly what it is. I need your help, Eric. If the baby is yours, if the baby is mine, we'll deal with that when we know for sure. But Julia, you need to understand something. Whether that child is mine or not, you and I are finished. What you did to our marriage, to my trust, to my life, that's not something I can forgive. I know I hurt you. You destroyed me, and then you laughed about it with your lover. There's no coming back from that. I hung up and sat in my empty apartment, staring at the wall and trying to figure out how my life had become such a complete mess. But as I thought about everything that had happened, the affair, the embezzlement, the pregnancy, I realized that Julia and Victor had made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated me. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in Agent Chen's office, reviewing Julia's testimony, when she dropped a bombshell that changed everything. Mr. Lamb, I need to ask you about something your wife mentioned during her deposition. What about? She claims that you broke into Victor Garrison's office and stole the financial documents you provided to us. I kept my expression neutral, even though my heart was racing. That's an interesting theory. Does she have any proof? She says you had help from someone in the security company that handles the Garrison building. Agent Chen, my wife is facing serious federal charges. She's desperate. And desperate people say desperate things. If I had broken into Victor's office, wouldn't there be security footage? Alarm records? Some kind of evidence? That's what we're trying to determine. I think what happened is that Julia realized she had access to incriminating documents through her position in HR, and now she's trying to minimize her own involvement by claiming I forced her to provide them. Agent Chen studied me carefully. Your wife also mentioned that you have military training. Reconnaissance, she said. I served my country for 10 years. I'm proud of that service, but I'm not sure what it has to do with this case. She's suggesting that you use that training to conduct surveillance on her and Mr. Garrison. Agent Chen, I discovered my wife was having an affair because I found text messages on her phone. I didn't need military training for that. I just needed eyes. The agent made some notes, then looked up at me again. There's something else. Your wife is claiming that the pregnancy she mentioned is actually Mr. Garrison's child, and that she lied to you about the paternity to try to get financial support. This was news to me, and I felt a mixture of relief and rage. Relief that I wouldn't be tied to Julia for the next 18 years, and rage that she'd tried to manipulate me even after everything else she'd done. Well, that simplifies things considerably. She's also claiming that you threatened to expose her affair unless she helped you frame Mr. Garrison for embezzlement. I laughed, but there wasn't any humor in it. Agent Chen, let me ask you something. Have you reviewed the financial records I provided? Yes. Do they show evidence of embezzlement? Yes. Do they show a pattern of financial crimes going back years? Yes. Then whether I obtained them by breaking into an office, finding them in my wife's purse, or receiving them from space aliens doesn't really matter, does it? Victor Garrison is a criminal, and the evidence proves it. Agent Chen was quiet for a moment. Mr. Lamb, I want to be straight with you. Your wife is trying to negotiate a better deal by providing information about your alleged criminal activities. But the evidence you provided has been invaluable to our investigation, and we've been able to verify its authenticity through other sources. What does that mean for me? It means that as long as you haven't committed any crimes in the course of providing this evidence, you're not in any legal jeopardy. And if I had committed crimes, then you'd need a lawyer. I nodded. I think we're done here, Agent Chen. Unless you're planning to arrest me? Not today, Mr. Lamb, but I'd recommend staying available in case we have more questions. I left the FBI office and drove directly to Tom's apartment. He was waiting for me with a beer and a grim expression. "How bad is it?" he asked. "Julia's trying to throw us both under the bus. She told them we broke into Victor's office. Can they prove it?" "Not unless you kept souvenirs." Tom shook his head. "Everything's been destroyed. But Eric, this is getting dangerous. If they start digging into the security company's records, they won't find anything. You covered our tracks too well." "I hope you're right. There's something else. Julia's claiming the baby is Victor's, not mine." Tom raised an eyebrow. "How do you feel about that?" "Relieved and furious. She tried to manipulate me into supporting another man's child. So what's the plan now?" I smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Now we let Julia and Victor destroy each other, and then we finish what we started." The next morning, I received a call from an unknown number. "Mr. Lamb, this is Angela Garrison, Victor's wife." I was surprised to hear from her, but not entirely shocked. "Mrs. Garrison, what can I do for you?" "I'd like to meet with you. There are some things we need to discuss." We met at an upscale restaurant downtown, where Angela was waiting at a corner table, looking elegant and composed despite the circumstances. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down. "I have to admit, I'm curious about what you want to discuss." "I want to discuss my husband's affairs, all of them." She opened a leather portfolio and spread several photographs across the table. They showed Victor with different women in various compromising situations: restaurant dates, hotel entrances, intimate moments. "How long have you known?" I asked. "Years. Victor thinks he's clever, but he's actually quite predictable. He has a type: married women who work for the company, usually in positions where they have access to financial information." "Why didn't you leave him?" Angela smiled coldly. "Because I was waiting for the right moment to destroy him completely. Your wife's affair was just the opportunity I needed." "I don't understand." "Mr. Lamb, I've been documenting Victor's crimes and infidelities for years, waiting for him to make a mistake big enough to justify taking everything from him. When you exposed their affair at the Christmas party, you gave me the perfect opening. You're the one who tipped off the FBI. I provided them with additional evidence to support what you'd already given them. But there's more." She pulled out another set of documents. "Victor has been hiding assets in offshore accounts, preparing to flee the country if his embezzlement was discovered. He's also been planning to frame your wife for the entire scheme. Julia mentioned that he was setting her up. It's worse than she knows. Victor has been systematically creating evidence that makes her look like the mastermind behind the embezzlement. If she hadn't agreed to cooperate with the FBI, she would have gone to prison for decades." I studied the documents, seeing the careful way Victor had constructed his frame job. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want Victor to suffer the way he's made me suffer. And I think you want the same thing for your wife." "What do you have in mind?" Angela's smile was sharp as a blade. "I want to make sure that both of them lose everything: their freedom, their reputations, their futures. And I think you're exactly the right person to help me do it." The Garrison Industries board meeting was scheduled for a Thursday morning in the company's executive conference room. Angela had arranged for me to attend as her financial advisor, giving me a front-row seat to watch Victor's world collapse. Victor arrived looking haggard and desperate, accompanied by his lawyer, and clearly unaware that his wife had been orchestrating his downfall for months. He'd been released on bail pending trial, but the stress was showing in his pale complexion and trembling hands. "Ladies and gentlemen," the board chairman began, "we're here today to address the serious allegations against Mr. Garrison and determine the company's path forward." Victor's lawyer stood up. "My client maintains his innocence and looks forward to clearing his name in court." "That's interesting," Angela said, rising from her seat, "because I have evidence that suggests otherwise." She nodded to me, and I activated the laptop connected to the conference room's presentation system. The screen filled with financial records, photographs, and recorded conversations, years of evidence documenting Victor's crimes and affairs. "What you're seeing," Angela continued, "is a comprehensive record of my husband's embezzlement, fraud, and systematic manipulation of female employees. The evidence shows that Victor has stolen over $4 million from this company and used his position to coerce women into relationships." Victor was staring at the screen in horror. "Angela, what are you doing?" "I'm doing what I should have done years ago, exposing you for the criminal you are." The board members were studying the evidence with growing alarm. The financial records alone were damning, but the photographs and recordings painted a picture of a man who'd been using his company as his personal criminal enterprise. "There's more," I said, advancing to the next slide. "Mr. Garrison has been systematically framing Julia Lamb, his most recent victim, for crimes he committed. He seduced her, manipulated her into authorizing financial transfers, then created false evidence to make her appear to be the mastermind behind the embezzlement." Julia's lawyer, who was also present, looked stunned. "This changes everything about my client's case." "It certainly does," Angela agreed. "Victor planned to flee the country and let Mrs. Lamb take the blame for his crimes. Fortunately, her husband was smart enough to uncover the truth." Victor finally found his voice. "This is all fabricated. Angela's been planning this for months, trying to destroy me because of our marital problems." "Our marital problems?" Angela laughed. "Victor, our marital problems started when you began stealing from your own company and sleeping with your employees. I've simply been documenting your crimes." The board chairman cleared his throat. "Mr. Garrison, in light of this evidence, the board has no choice but to terminate your employment immediately and pursue all available legal remedies." "You can't do this," Victor said, his voice rising. "I built this company. I made you all rich." "You stole from this company," one of the board members replied, "and you've exposed us to massive legal liability." Victor turned to his wife with desperation in his eyes. "Angela, please, we can work this out. I'll get help. I'll make things right." "Victor, the only thing you're going to make right is a prison cell." Security guards entered the conference room to escort Victor from the building. As they led him away, he looked back at me with pure hatred. "This isn't over, Lamb. I'll destroy you for this." "You already tried," I replied calmly. "It didn't work out the way you planned." After Victor was removed, Angela turned to the board. "Gentlemen, I'll be filing for divorce immediately. I want it clear that I had no involvement in my husband's crimes, and that I've been cooperating fully with law enforcement." The board members nodded, clearly eager to distance themselves from the scandal. As the meeting broke up, Angela approached me. "Thank you for your help with this. Thank you for the opportunity. It was very satisfying. What will you do now?" "Now I'm going to have a conversation with my wife." I found Julia at the federal building, where she was meeting with prosecutors to finalize her cooperation agreement. She looked exhausted and defeated, a far cry from the confident woman who'd been mocking me in text messages just months earlier. "Eric," she said when she saw me, "I heard about the board meeting. Is it true that Angela had evidence of Victor framing me?" "It's true. You were being set up from the beginning." Julia sat down heavily in a chair. "I can't believe I was so stupid. I thought he loved me." "He used you, Julia, just like he used all the others. The prosecutors are saying I'll probably get probation and community service. My lawyer thinks the evidence of Victor's manipulation will help my case." "That's good news for you?" "Eric, I know you hate me, but I need you to know something. I never meant for any of this to happen." I looked at this woman I'd once loved, this stranger who destroyed our marriage for a man who'd been planning to destroy her. "Julia, you made choices. Every day for months, you chose to lie to me, to cheat on me, to mock me behind my back. Those weren't accidents. They were decisions. I know. And I'll regret them for the rest of my life. Good, you should. What happens now? With us, I mean. There is no us, Julia. There hasn't been for a long time. I walked away, leaving her sitting there with the wreckage of her life spread around her like broken glass. Outside the federal building, Tom was waiting by his car. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Like justice has been served." "And Julia?" "Julia's learning that actions have consequences. It's a lesson she should have learned a long time ago." We drove through the city as the sun set behind the buildings, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Victor was facing decades in prison. Julia had lost her career, her marriage, and her reputation. Angela would walk away with millions in divorce settlements. And me? I'd learned that I was stronger than I'd thought, smarter than my enemies had believed, and capable of fighting back when cornered. "So what's next?" Tom asked. "Next, I rebuild my life, without liars, cheaters, or manipulators." Sounds like a good plan. I smiled, feeling truly free for the first time in months. Yeah, it does. The city lights were coming on as we drove home, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I was looking forward to tomorrow.